All right, welcome back. We are COMP1011. That's Advanced OOP with Java in the summer 2022 semester at Georgian. And it's week 12, part 2 of our broadcast and recording together. In the first part, we really did kind of an installation of Android and those kind of things. And in this part, we're going to continue with some of the things that we're doing. We talked about how to install an emulator, several emulators. One of them being LD Player, which is my preference, but you can use any emulator you like. You can use the emulator that's built into Android Studio if you like, which is pretty good right now compared to what it once was. We also briefly talked about the Android application lifecycle, which is something we're going to get to know more about next week, okay, as we move forward. And then next week will be the last little Android thing we're doing, so just 2 weeks of Android, and then we're getting back into our final exam, which is going to focus on APIs. Let's get into this one. So we talked about onCreate. onCreate executed when the activity is being created, and the activity that we saw in our little example. If I go back to my main activity is the one that's being created. So this is it right here. All right. So here it is, and this is onCreate. So this function is going to be executed as soon as this starts. Okay, so what if, here's something, I want to use this thing and I want to, I want to be able to make this nicer and make it look bigger. What do I do in terms of, application properties to make this a bigger font? What would I do, right? Because you guys should know this from here. So if I wanted to go to, settings, take a look at settings here. If I go to settings and bring this up, appearance is what it looks like. And it looks like use a custom font with the size, right? But remember, in the editor, we can choose any font we want. So right now it's JetBrains Mono 13 size, line height 1.2. It's typically what I want to go with, something bigger, like something like 18. And otherwise you won't be able to see my font as nicely. So that's what I would do. If you're wondering why it's so small, it's because for Android, you have to modify your settings. They're different than they are in IntelliJ. Okay, so that's the first thing. Here on the side, it's very similar, and the same thing goes with version control. That's here as well as everything else. So VCS for now, right now, my application is not, kind of in using version control. And notice if I want to enable it, I'm going to click on enable version control integration, or, which I recommend even more, go to the terminal, like I talked about before, and you can see where this is, Android Studio projects, blah, blah, blah. And I want to just do the same thing by just doing git init. You can see I can do the same thing here, git commit -m, and I'll call this initial commit. Okay, this is the thing that I want to do. Or how about git add dot first? Git add dot. Here we go. And then I'll do that one. There we go. And once I've got this, then what I want to do is I want to put this up on GitHub. And I need to go up on GitHub first, just like we did many times before. And I'm going to go to github.com/Georgian College here. And I'm just going to click New. And I'm going to make this public. And this will be called whatever I want it to be called, which is COMP1011 in the summer 2022 semester. And this will be called ICE10, right, which is what I want this to be. Okay, create repository. It's going to give me steering instructions, which all I need is these last 3 lines of code right here. I'm going to copy them. I'm going to go back to Android Studio this time, right click and paste, and press enter, and then away we go. Done. So now my application is up on GitHub. Let's take a look and confirm that that's true. Refresh. And you can see here, there it is. All right. And this is how you'd share your app with me if I was going to take a look at it. Great thing to look at is up here. If I go to app, you can see that I have source, SRC, and I have my main. And under main, I have my Android manifest. We're going to talk about that in a second. Java, which is my 3 Java applications. So main activity, which is where we start off. This is how it's organized on the operating system. And under resources, you can see that I have kind of everything that I talked about before. In the layout area, I have my 3 layouts, which is my activity, my content, my fragment, and my other fragment. Okay, that's where everything is. Those are my 3 XML files, or 4 XML files. All right, so that is how it looks. And I'm just pointing this out because this is the way it works from this part. If I want to add a Readme file here, I can do that. I can add a Readme file, and I can say something like COMP1011 M22 ICE10, and I'll say, let's say another couple of hashes. So this is the markdown. I can say demo app for OOP with Java. So COMP1011 OOP with Java at Georgian College in the summer 2022 semester. There we go. I can do that. And I can press commit new file. And I can do that online. The problem with this is that now I'm 1 commit behind. And of course, what I can do is just like before, I can just do a git fetch. And git fetch will show me that I'm 1 commit behind. It'll tell me that that is true. So, or one commit behind master. And by the way, one thing I can talk about here as well is if I was to exit this, notice here at the top, now I have a git, right? Before I had VCS, so it detected just like before, that I have a version control integration built in now. I've done that. And this is pretty cool. I can look at GitHub. I can share my project on GitHub. I can create my pull requests. I can do all that stuff here like normal here inside this menu, but it also detected that I have that. But what I want to do now is I want to pull because I'm behind. So I'm going to just do a git pull. And when I do that, I have my Readme file. Here's my readme.md file. And well, where does it kind of show up, right? Because what I want here is, for it to show up in here, right? So where is my Readme file that's here? Because it's not on Gradle scripts, it's not there, right? And it's not an XML, and it's not anywhere, right? So it's not showing me my Readme file here. But in the operating system itself, it will show me the file. So again, just like before, if I want to kind of look at the file, I want to look at this file in the operating system, how would I do it, right? Because just like I want to see it, I want to say, here's file properties, right? I can do that. I can open recent and I can open, but what about if I actually want to look at this file? So if I want to look inside first fragment and I want to do that, right? So remember there were some ways of doing this before, and how do I do it now? How am I able to look at this in the operating system? How? Well, here there really isn't, as you can see here, if I go here and right click, before I was able to kind of open in kind of in File Explorer or whatever. Here, do you see that as an option? So again, some different things. Remember that one thing I want to talk about is here's File in Explorer. If I open that up, you can see that it's going to open this up here. You can see that it'll take you right to the thing. It's not the same menu as exactly as IntelliJ, but very similar, right? So I can back up, and if I go back to my application, then here's my Readme file. So what I'm seeing here in the operating system, this is another learning. What I'm seeing in the operating system is different, very different than what I'm seeing here in my project view. My project view, my application view, two different things. Notice here that my app is the highest level that I can see at this point. Okay. So, yeah, that's Android. So that's what I'm focusing on. If I go to project, though, and if I look inside a project, then there's my Readme file. Okay, there's my Readme file. I can look at my Readme file right there. Okay, but that's if I'm looking at the project itself. So when I look at the project, I'm seeing a very similar view here to what I'm seeing here. Okay, very similar. You see folders here, and kind of one-to-one. But if I go back to Android here, now I'm seeing a different view, and don't be confused by it, please. All right, great. So now that's the first thing. So first things first, we got this. Next, let's go through some stuff that we have here. We talked about the onCreate method, but there's also this pesky thing called an Android manifest. So here's my Android manifest, more Turing stuff. The Android manifest is very interesting. And what it does is it gives us almost like, it's kind of our core file, I would say. Without the Android manifest, you can't do a build. That's a key thing as well, right? On the right, it talks about a bunch of things that you can do. These are capabilities for your application itself, right? And notice we're looking at this as text. At the bottom, there's something called a merge manifest that you can look at as well. Okay, so there's text and there's merge manifest, right? And you can see that there's other manifest files that are being included here as well. So any other manifest files that are here. For example, the Lifecycle manifest and a bunch of other stuff, okay? So this is just this Android manifest itself. Notice that it says the core manifest is 1.7.0. Then this file, which is this is the build Gradle manifest and a bunch of other ones. Let's go back to text. So what text does is for the manifest, it talks about the default icon. There's a default icon for this thing, all right? As well as our label. This is the label for the application. We can change this here if we really want to, right? Now, one thing to note is it says @string app name. Okay, @string app name, which is very interesting. So if I click on some of this stuff, you can see that the actual label for some of this stuff switches around. And it looks like it's pointing to something called @string. Why? By the way, I wanted to talk about something else. It says CZ details and see report. @string, what it's actually doing is there's some sub files that we have to look at here as well. On the left, right, notice that there's layouts. And there's also some additional files that are here on the left, okay? If I go down to the values, right, on values, notice that there are several different XML files that are included here as well. And one of them happens to be our strings.xml file. Take a look at this. Strings.xml file is where all of our strings are for everything in our application, okay? So here's something I want to ask you guys, just curious for you guys, all right? Why? Why do we need this strings.xml file here? I want you to give me a sense of this. Maybe you guys can think about why here? Why putting it here instead of where I had it before? What are your thoughts? This is a key learning, by the way. And this is something that's centric to Android. Well, so to support, yeah, so Giovanni says to support different languages. Absolutely. So what this is localization support. This is really great, right? So what this does is instead of, and I'm looking at any of these things, for example, first fragment label. First fragment label is a string, that's an XML object, right? And we have two parts. We have a couple of different attributes of XML. XML, if you remember XML, the way it works, you have an opening tag and you have a closing tag, right? And then you have in the opening tag itself, you have an attribute. Usually that attribute, in this case name, identifies the actual value. String, this is key value pairs, all right? So the key is the name, and the value for the key is first fragment label, and the value for what's being held inside the first fragment label variable is first fragment, all right? And instead of hard coding it, I have a file, right, where I can switch it from a central location, and I can, have multiple files. So instead of strings, I can call this English strings, or Italian strings, or Hispanic strings, or whatever language I want, right? And I can kind of put it in here, and I can switch, I can have a bunch of these things done. And what I can do is I can swap out the string depending on the type of language that's selected, which is kind of cool, right? As opposed to hunting it down inside of our program where it's hard coded, right? If I was going to look in here, this is the one string that's not something that's being used by the application itself, right? So that's something to note. Here's something else. It says run app. Here is apply changes and restart the activity, right? I haven't really done anything yet, but let's just run the app. Okay, let's see. I'm going to run the app on my phone. Okay, that's what this is targeting again, right? And by the way, whenever you see some of this, like when you see something like see details and submit report, this ID error, sometimes you get this kind of stuff. I think the first thing I always like to do is say, ignore it, unless it breaks your application, and that would be bad. So let's wait until this thing is installed. It looks like it's still running. We're still good, no problem. And let's run this thing on our LD player. So again, notice that the emulators that are up here that I have a choice of. I'm going to click this one, which is my LD player. And let's run it again. So you can see that this is running fine, even if this ID error is here. I don't care. Again, I'm doing this because I see this error and I don't want that to interrupt me. So it says run succeeded on the left. You can see that if I go back to my LD player, then sure enough, there it is. Okay. So what do I want to do? What I want to do here is I want to swap out some of the information that I have in my app. And I started with this idea here. So I got my resources and I have some ideas that I have some stuff here. And I want to modify some of this layout. So let's go back to my first fragment. Let's go back to my first fragment. My first fragment has a button. How does the button work? I want to click the button and it's going to take me to my second fragment. That's what it's going to do. And here it says hello first fragment. Let's just say I want to change this, the information here to hello world, hello first fragment. But on the left, notice it says text view first, right? That's my text view. And it says it uses something called a, strings, this kind of stuff here. So how do I change this here without going directly to the XML? I don't want to go to the XML. On the right, I'm just going to pull this in a little bit so you can see it. I've got a couple of things here, right? So here's my ID, text view first. Okay, here's my ID. And it says a couple things. I have my layout constraint, which is @ID button first, right? There's my declared attributes. So here's my ID, text view first. Here's my text, right? As an example. So how do I modify the values of this here as well? I mean, I'm going to put it up here. On the top, let's also look at the top here. I've got my widgets, my layouts, and everything else. I've got my fragment, which is what I'm looking at right here. On the top here of my design, I get select design interface. I can change my orientation for a preview. I can change the current night mode if I want to. So not night or night. There's night mode. Okay. So I can try and see what it looks like when in night mode. Here is the API version that I'm previewing, 32. If I want to preview something else, for example, 31, I can do that. Right? I can kind of preview 31 instead of 32. Okay, which is kind of where I'm at because I'm using 31 for the most part. Here is my application, the default theme that I'm using. I can also change that, and I can add more themes if I want to. And then on the right, it tells me that there is my default English US version. Okay, so that's what's happening there. And I'm kind of just giving you your application here so you see it. One more thing to note is that we haven't talked about is something called Logcat. So Logcat is very interesting. Logcat is the way that we can get a lot of my information. If you want to have anything in the console, and you might be thinking about, how do I do a console thing? You do it through Logcat, my friends. That's how you do it. And the only way you're going to do it through Logcat is when it's connected to your emulator. Here you can see that it's constantly doing something because my emulator is running. Okay, so Logcat is one of the ways we use that. Okay, that's Logcat. We use that for debugging purposes. Okay, here's build. All right, so we can look at the build itself, and we can have a build analyzer that's built in here as well. All right, so really cool. These things here are constraints. Notice that there are constraints for my first fragment, and I can move this around where I want to, right? I can move my first fragment around to some degree. Okay. I can also, kind of describe what I want to do here in terms of the things I want. Let's suppose I want to change my hello first fragment here. I want to, kind of change this up to make it look like something else. How do I do that? So notice here is the text view, and this is the component tree. If you think about this as the hierarchy, here's the button. I can click on this as well. So there's the constraint layout, okay, as an example. Again, I'm looking at fragment first to do this, okay? My text view and my button first. If I looked at my second fragment second, again, I have my text view, which is empty, and my button second. So that's what I can see here. Let's go back to my first fragment as well. So I have these. I want to be able to modify these strings, but I don't want it to do it directly in here, okay? I want to do it through my first fragment right in here. So notice here that when I want to do that, if I click on my first fragment, like here, take a look at the right. So notice that I have up here, I have my attributes. I have my attributes, I have my constraints, and I have my transforms, right? So this is kind of a context-sensitive menu of my entire kind of application. So if I click somewhere here like this, you can see that this is related to my text first, my label, which is called my text first. So that's my ID. You can actually change that ID right here, okay? Layout width, this is wrap content, and it says that my layout constraint bottom is used on @ID button first. That's what it does, okay? And this is my ID text first, and this is my string for hello first fragment. If I click this little bar right here, notice it comes up to say pick a resource. This is kind of neat. And it says hello first fragment is what I'm going to do. The name is hello first fragment, and the value here is hello first fragment. And I want to be able to create my string resource as I want. Let's make another, instead of hello first fragment, let's make a hello world. So on the top left here, it says add resource to the module. So I'm going to click add resource to the module. And I want to add a string value. Now it says a string resource file or a string value. I don't want a new resource file. I just want a new string value. All right. The resource name is a friendly name. It's going to be stored in my file name strings.xml. Okay. And what I want you guys to do is in the resource name, think about a friendly name that we can use. Notice that the name that we have here is hello first fragment. Let's just call this hello world. So hello world. That is going to be the resource name. That is going to be the variable that we're going to store this information. The resource value is the actual text, the text of the string itself, the literal, right? Which is going to be hello world. Hey, look at that. And it's going to be stored where? In Strings XML. Okay. That's where it's going to be stored. If I click OK, you can see now that I'm going to have a brand new value that I can use for my stuff, my hello world string. Okay, so where did it go? And is it even here? And that's kind of the thing that we want to look at. Well, the way to test this, okay, let's press OK. The way to test this now is if I go to my Strings XML file, does it exist? And sure enough, it just inserted this thing right here. We haven't used it yet, but it's here. I want to show you the relationship, on how this works. Okay, let's go back to our, our layout again, fragment first. All right, I want to change this up so it doesn't look at fragment first. It's going to say hello world. And here what I can do is I want to be able to select it. So I want to select this thing. So here's my hello world now. It came up and I want to press OK. And when I do that, it should say hello world. So that's the first customization change. Save. File, save. We want to save all, right? And let's build it and run it in my emulator. So let's see what happens. So I'm targeting my emulator. Let's run it and let's see what happens. We always want to change the emulator settings. We're going really super slow here, guys, because I want you guys to get how everything works. Notice that the Gradle build will have to rebuild everything because I've added a new value in my Strings XML file. That's what changed right now. And it's got to rebuild the entire application. By the way, if this little IDE error is really bugging you, it says see details, and I can just clear all and it'll clear it up. For now, let's wait until this is built, right? As an example, and let's see, it says launch succeeded, right? And let's go back into my thing here, and there's hello world. Okay, cool. It's pretty dull though. If I click next, you can see it doesn't say anything previous. It's going to go back and say hello world. There we go. Okay. So that's okay. But what if I want to style this? I want to change the way this looks and all that stuff. Like, how do I do that? Right? Because that's like pretty basic, right? In terms of the way it's looking right now. So here on the right, there's constraints, there's visibilities, there's a transform. You can see that I can rotate it, and here's the text that I can put in here as well. And you can see, you can look at all attributes. If you scroll down here, you can see things like the background and the buffer type and if they're clickable or not, and a bunch of other stuff here that's also available, right? And I'm showing you this because there's more to it, okay, than what we've seen so far. Okay, padding, pretty much everything you can possibly think of is here, and a lot of them are inside of different little XML files that are going to hold on to how things are working. Okay, here's the text color, right? And notice it says it's storing it in secondary text material, but we can select our text color to be whatever color we want. Let's suppose I want to make this color something unique, right? Instead of hello world, I want to make it something else. I can change that color, right? And we can select, let's go back way up to the top here. These are all the different things here, right? So again, layout, height, and width. Let's go back to this. We can see that the width and the height, these are declared attributes, right? And we have our text and all that stuff. I can close the layout up. Let's say I don't want to say the layout or the transforms. I don't want to transform it. Transforming it, I can rotate it, right? I can rotate the view, and you can see that that's indeed what happens on the x-axis, right? Or I can rotate it across the y-axis, right? So I can make it so that it looks more from a 3D perspective. The most common, of course, is to rotate it across the z-axis. In this case, our application is x is this way, y is this way, and z is into and out of the screen. So if I rotate this one, it'll actually rotate the view any way I want. All right, that's how it does it. Okay, let's undo that change. So that's our transformations, rotation, alpha transparency, and a bunch of other stuff. Common attributes is text, right? Text appearance, right? So again, you can see that there is an appearance that I have here as well, right? And if I open it up, it shows me font family, typeface, and a bunch of other stuff in terms of line color and so on. Let's say I don't want to use sans serif, but I want to use sans serif black. I can do that. It kind of makes it more bold, right? And instead of my text size being 14 points, that's what this is, I can change that to something bigger, like 24 points. Okay, and you can see that what's happened is the constraints also change. The constraints, these little patterns that we see here, you can see that it's kind of balancing it off so that there is some kind of, it's relative, because remember, this is supposed to be compatible with all devices. So one thing to note about constraints is that you want this thing to kind of be compatible with the right side of any device, the left side, the top, and this button. Okay. So cool, let's rebuild. Let's see if I rebuild and we run the app again, what happens? Again, it'll build the app, and we should see it rebuild here in our LD player in a second. We'll just look at it live. And one thing we want to always think about is we want what you see is what you get. So whatever the proportions are of this is what we want here. Okay. And it's not quite done yet. There it is, and it's reinstalling it, and you can see here that that is indeed what we have. What we can do is to make it more realistic, we can try and match up our LD player so we can do a side-by-side here like so. There we go. So that is kind of the same size. So what we're seeing here and what we're seeing here should be the same. And what do you notice? What do you notice here? Here's the exact same size, right? And one thing is to note is the screen size has to be the same as well. Just make sure that not just one side, but all sides are the same. So we're just going to do one of these just to match up what we see here as much as possible. Okay, so does it look the same to you? Does it look the same to you? And the answer is it doesn't, right? Resolution is different. So here is 1440 by 3040, right? And here it's something else, right? And again, take a look. So again, we're looking at 31, right? There's a lot of configuration changes you can do for the app itself. And let's go back to the main activity for a second. And sorry, main activity, activity main XML is what I meant. So this is interesting. So this is the parent activity. That's what it does. And again, one thing to note is if I click on the view, right, there's a lot of things that we have off the cuff. Notice it says layout content main is where the layout's coming from. Okay, so content main XML, let's go back to that for a second. So that is the layout. Can I modify each button? The answer is no, you can't. So the content is interesting. That's where we have our, it's more like the host fragment. So the content is almost like a canvas that's sitting inside of the activity. So activity, inside the activity, we have a content. Inside the content, we have a fragment, whatever the active fragment is going to be. Okay. Things to note. One other thing you can do is here, you notice that I can resize the stuff that I have in here so I can see it larger or smaller, right? I can do the same thing by zooming in and zooming out like this. I can reset it back to normal, right? I can go 1-to-1. So this is the actual size. Again, these are all things that that you need to know how to do in terms of manipulating what we're having here. Here on the right, it says toggle tool visibility position. And there's other things here. Guidelines, you can see that you can align. There's a lot of little quick ways of aligning your objects here on the screen. Okay. But what if I wanted to take this thing right here and I want to move it closer to this thing, okay, closer to the button. I don't want to make it up there. I want to take this thing and move it close to down there, right? So again, notice that it's context sensitive on the right. And I don't care about declared variables or common attributes or all attributes. What I want is now layout. Okay, so here's something of a layout. And it says, here are my constraints, right? And you can see here that I have control over what I want to put in here. So when I look at the button, right, and I can see some of this stuff. Here's the constraint widget. That's what this thing is here. So if I look at constraints here, there's 4 constraints that we have, right? And one of them is my bottom, which is the bottom parent. And the top is my text view first. It connects to this thing, right? So that's my constraint. What if I remove the constraint? Can I do that? Can I take away that constraint? And when I do, bad things happen to good people, right? It doesn't really know what to do. It says, hey, there is no relative, there's nothing relative to this thing. I can move it up wherever I want now, right? I'm just going to put it up there, right? And so what this does is it allows me to move my objects around the way I like them. Now, why does this move? Well, because this has a constraint to the button. Notice that now this thing looks like it's kind of like this jaggy constraint here for my hello world, okay? But my button doesn't have a constraint. It doesn't care about this. All it cares about is my right, my left, and my bottom, which is absolute. Okay, so bottom parent, 112 dp, right? Top, we don't have. We don't have a top. Can I add a constraint, right? What if I want to add a constraint? Notice here on the top, on the bottom, we have 112. I put back to 0 here we can do numerically. We can put this back. Here's back to 0. And at the top, I can select a minimum value, right, as an example. So here's my minimum value at the top. So top, it says, again, bottom of text view, 250. If I go 0, back to 0, then you can see we're back to where we were before. So we have the constraint. This constraint is a little bit, see how this is kind of like a, curve, and before it was nothing. So again, this is relative to this. So if I move this up, take a look, I can't seem to move this up and down anymore because I'm constrained by this piece, right? Okay, I can't do that. So constraints are interesting, and what constraints do is they allow us to align objects automatically or automatically on the screen. If I had another object, let's say, for example, I go back and grab another button and pull it in. Here's another button right here. I can drag and drop this button in, right? The button needs some information, okay? Whenever we drag a button in, it says automatically, it says not vertically constrained and not horizontally constrained. It talks about compilation errors and what this will do if you try and build this view, okay? So we want to add constraints. So if I would add a constraint, and again, what we can do is we can say bottom to the text view first. We can put 0. And then 0 means it's hugging this text view, right? And at the top, we can kind of add in a constraint, and we can also put 0. So now it's kind of in the middle. 0, 0 is almost like auto layout in many ways, right? And then left and right, we can add 0. We don't want to put 120. 120 is kind of a absolute positioning. And if I put 0 again here, then I can position this button exactly relative between this one and this one. So this is kind of in this space up here. In fact, this is the portion of the screen that it's going to appear every single time. That's the button. Other things that it says hard-coded text, click the badge for detail. We don't want to put buttons like this here. So this is like the hello button, if you will. All right, that's what this thing is, okay? So if I want to, let's call this the hello button as an ID. Hello button. There it is. And it says, okay, so rename ID resource button, and its usage is to hello button, and it's we want to do that, and we want a scope is in the project files. I want to refactor. So now it's called hello button. Let's go back. Let's move away from layout, and let's go into common attributes. So, declared attributes. Under declared attributes, the button is hard-coded. We don't want this. We want to use the strings file, right? So let's do that. So we're going to click there, and we're going to create a brand new string in the strings file. We're going to call this the click me button. Okay, we're going to rename this in a second. So let's do that. So we're going to do a new string value. We're going to have the string value called the, click me. There it is. The value is going to be click me like this. That's the actual string literal. And it's going to sit inside the strings file. Okay, and then I'm going to press kind of OK. There we go. Awesome. Press OK again. And what I want to do is this button, let's rename it one more time. Watch this. We'll call this the click me button. There's the click me button. It'll refactor it again. You can see that it'll do that. So now it's called the click me button. But we don't want this button text to be here. We want to select the click me text, right? And I'm going to press OK. So now it's going to say click me. Awesome. So how does button clicking work in the first place? Well, first, let's just say we've added a couple things here. So let's go back to our terminal here, and we'll say git add dot, and we're almost done here. Git commit -m, and we'll say added new click me button and modified text. That's all we did. Git push. All right, so we did this part, and we're good to go. Awesome. Okay, so in the next button, let's look at the next button to give us some hints. So first of all, let's see if this builds. Okay, that's the first thing we want to do. So we modified some stuff. Let's see if it builds, or if we're not good, we'll stop the app, stop all processes. We'll do that first. And then what we want to do is we have this little thing that comes up and says toggle visibility of issue panel E. right? So it says compilation errors. And it says this project contains Java compilation errors, which can cause rendering failures, right? As an example. And if I go to my main activity, it would have any compilation errors would be here. We don't have any compilation errors anymore. It was just a weird issue with our IDE. We're going to go back to my fragment for a second. Here it is. And I'm just going to run it again on my emulator. So again, I'm going to bring up my LD player and then click play, and it's going to modify my application again. So it's going to rebuild my app. Every time we make a change, we need to rebuild it, and it's going to make it up here. Here's my hello world. And it's going to build in a second. One day. And we kind of did something similar with FXML, didn't we? So a couple of things. Why is it taking so long? Remember, this is iterative. That's one thing to note as well, right? So whenever we build something and we rebuild it, it becomes iterative. That means that, and we've made some pretty good changes. We made layout changes and so on. There it is. Here you can see the click me button, the next button in the hello world. Click me doesn't do anything right now, but we want it to do something in a second. So that's the first thing we want to do. Awesome. Okay, great. So it built. Fantastic. That means layout is okay. Everything's good. Now, let's get a hint of how to make the event happen. Back to next. So if I click next now, again, here's our button first, and it says, here's our layout constraints. Here's our button first. That's the ID. This is the text for it, like we saw, right? So here's our layout. We don't need to change our layout. Here's our transforms. We're not transforming the button. Here's our common attributes. Here's the style. And then there's an on-click event. Take a look at that. There's our on-click event. And what we want to do is we want to do this so it kind of has our on-click event here. When I click on the button, our on-click event will do something. But here, our next button doesn't do that. Interesting, right? But remember, we have our first fragment, our main activity, and our second fragment. Let's take a look at our first fragment code, right? Take a look at that. So double-click on that. You can see that we have a fragment. Remember, this fragment is a little piece of code that we have in here. And we have this on view created, right? And on view created, we have a binding button first, set on click listener, and then we have this. So we kind of want to do this. We could do this way as well. This is in code. And okay, interesting. I want to be able to do this, no problem. So then, okay, a couple things to note here. So we have our fragment first binding, which is our binding object. That's what it is. And where did we get this piece? Where did we get this binding button first thing? Button first, okay. How about if I wanted to get that on like the click me button? Where does that come from? Like where did the button first thing come from in the first place? Okay. Well, let's take a look at the XML file. So again, we're just inspecting things for a second to understand how this all works. So if I look at the actual code file, the code for XML, it says that we have our button, and there's two buttons. There's a button underscore first, that's the first button. And you can see here that we have a string, Android text, string is next. That's what we're using. That's the first button. And this is pretty cool. And then we have our second button, which is the click me button. There's the click me button. So maybe, is it as easy as, I'm just putting it out there for you, if we're going to be a little bit intuitive here, if I go back to my first fragment activity, what if I wanted to, on my view created, on view created is actually an event. So here's on create view. On create view and on view created is part of the fragment lifecycle. Okay, that's what this works out to be. All right, if I wanted to be more specific. So I want to do the same kind of button thing, and I want to make an on-click listener, right? Okay, So let's see if I can do it the same way. So I'm just going to go down here and just kind of drag in there. And I'm going to just start typing binding dot. And let's see what I get. I get button first. That's that button. And well, I don't get anything else. I want to be able to do the same thing with my other one. Well, look, here it is. There's my click me button. It's just like right there, right? So click me button, just like this, dot, and I can do the same thing, set on click listener, and we'll do the same thing. So in fact, let's just copy paste all this and just change the stuff that we want instead of redoing it by hand, because we're running out of time. And instead of button first, we'll just do the click me button, click me button, and it's been created based on my name. It kind of is intuitive in that it makes it. So here's my on click listener. Here's the anonymous on click method. And what it says here is something else. It says nav fragment, nav post, blah, blah, blah. I don't want to navigate anywhere. So this is not what's going to happen. This is what's going to happen within the listener itself, okay? Or within the handler. So again, this is the listener, right? And this in here is the handler. And this is an anonymous handler. I'm just going to make it so you can see it's my own. So here's the handler. And remember the handler, I'm doing it here. Could we use a lambda expression? Probably, right? But let's not do it right now. Let's just use this on click. And inside here, what I want to get access to is I want to get access to my text. Well, if I remember, if I go back to my my fragment first, my text object, my hello world, which is, it's called text view first. That's the ID, text view first. Here it is, text view first. Let's rename this thing, and let's just to make it easier for us, we'll call it the hello world label. That's what we'll call it, just to make sure what it is, okay? Now notice what we did, all right? Text view first. Here, when we click this, button first. Here, when we click me button. Underscores are the way we do it, right? So if I want to call this the hello world label, then I want to take the same structure. So if I said, I want to change this to the hello world label, right? And if I press enter, it's going to ask me to refactor, rename. I'm going to do that, refactor. So now it's called the hello world label that I can identify. And if I go back to my code for my first fragment, can I modify it? Well, let's see. So if I do hello first label, I don't get it, right? I can't hello world, I don't see it, right? So, right? If I did one of these, I can't do anything. But what if I did the binding trick again? If I said binding dot, and if I look at hello world label, hey, look at that, it's right there. Hello world label dot, and I want to, again, if I click on text, right? And there's get text, and there's also set text. I want to set text, right? And I could hard code it, right, to whatever I want. Set text has a bunch of different options, right? So what if I said something like, I want to set text to goodbye world, right? So goodbye world. If I did that, when I click onto it, I just want to change the text. And once it's changed forever. Okay, that's what I want. Okay, so let's save. And if I run it, let's rerun it. Let's see if it's going to work or break or whatever it's going to do. And let's pull up our little LD player right here. This is one way of doing it. We're going to talk about different ways. But this is kind of our first little test, right? And when it's done running, we'll know because it's going to flash in and out. Okay, it says process app is running. Did you terminate the app? No, I didn't, right? And so that's interesting. And let's go back to this. And if I click me, then it says goodbye world. But if I click me again, it doesn't go and do anything else. It just stays at goodbye world. So what do I want to do? If the text is already goodbye world, then I want to go and make it hello world. If it's hello world, I want to toggle it to make it goodbye world. Really exciting, like we did before, right? So again, that's pretty simple. We can just do the same thing as before. We can say, okay, if binding dot hello world label dot get text, right? If get text, and I want to compare it if it's equal to something like goodbye world, then I want to switch it to hello world, right? Otherwise, set it to goodbye world. And this is an if else, which means I could probably do it like this. Instead of my if statement, I can say that binding set text. This is what I want to do. And let's just take this part here. Let's use the ternary operator for this. So I'll say binding set text. If my get text is goodbye world or whatever, then, right, then we want to set up hello world. Otherwise, it's going to be goodbye world, which is kind of the ternary operator. Can't we do this? I mean, it's one big line, but it's kind of the way it works, right? So, and it's probably not going to like it because we're hard coding it. It's probably going to say something like rollback changes in current line, add method contract to set text. No, we're not going to do that. All right, if we click save here, and we'll just shore this up so we can do a toggle. And what this does, this handler, is it's going to toggle the text of the hello world label every time the click me button is clicked. That's what we want it to do. All right, so save. Pretty straightforward, really silly example. And we'll refresh. And let's see if this is going to work now. And it's going to rebuild. Now remember, we're hard coding. We're hard coding. And we may not want to do that. And as soon as it's done, we're going to run it. It says, no, we don't want to terminate that. We want to go back to this. And I want to click me. It's going to go goodbye world. Click me again. It's going to go hello world. And I'll be able to click back and forth between the two. So it's actually working. Nice. Pretty simple. So that's kind of our little way of accessing stuff. But I mean, yes, it's okay. And it's nice, right? That's awesome as well. And it'd be nice if, right, we can get these little bindings ahead of time. And it'd be nice if we didn't hard code. That also would be even nicer than what we just did, right? So that would be okay, but it'd be even nicer if we didn't have to do this, right? So notice we're doing the binding right in here. Binding, hello world, blah, 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 right? And the binding comes from this binding object, right? Which is binding all the first fragment objects into this kind of object that we're creating. So it's a private, kind of object that we're creating, this binding. So first fragment, first binding basically says it, if you read it, it says it extends the Android view binding object, right? And if you actually look there, it'll give you a little bit of information of what it is. A type which binds the views in a layout XML to fields. So that's kind of similar to what we did with our FXML document with that @FXML. So binding actually does that whole @FXML thing, right? Okay, that's what it does. So binding binds it all together, and then we can say that we want to use whatever object we want. Okay, that's kind of cool. So that is pretty cool when we want to make it so that it is the way it is. And we're almost done. We're almost done here. So, okay, that's neat. But what if I don't want to do this? I actually want to do something else, right? So what else does binding give us access to? Because binding gives us access to that, to hello world. And, but I want to have access to, other objects. Like what if I want to set text to something else, like to at something, right? Can I do that? Can I say that binding.hello world label dot, and notice it says set text, and it says an int res ID, right? A resource ID is what this is, okay? We can also set text to a text object, right? Sorry, Narinder. Assignment 2 is passed. That's already been done. 3 and 4 has been combined into one big assignment, which is assignment 3. It's due at the end of semester, okay? And I already talked about it in my first video. So 1 and 2, it's already there. It's up, you know, kind of what we have so far. But going back here, you can see that I can append, going back to what I was talking about, I can append and I can do a bunch of other stuff, get compound padding and filters and all this kind of stuff, right? With my label, I can do all these things. So, I want to set text. I want to set text, but I want to set text, you know, to an item. So I want to set text, and what I want to do is I want to set text to an @string resource ID. This one, @string resource ID. Can I just simply do you know, string and then slash whatever the ID is called? Okay, well, let's see how this works, right? So how will this @string resource work if I did it this way? Well, maybe we get some hints. It's the last thing we're going to do. So if I go back to our project right here, and if I look at my first fragment XML here, and if I look at my binding, it says @string hello world, @string hello world, okay? Let's make a test. Let's add a new resource in here. And we're going to have another one that says goodbye world. All right, so let's do that. So we'll make a new resource, string value, and we'll say goodbye world. And this will be the new one, which will be goodbye, comma, world, exclamation mark, right? And I'm gonna press OK, and press OK again. And that makes my new resource, goodbye world. So there's the hello world. Can I do this here? So can I just say @string slash goodbye world? Is that allowed? Can I just do that? How does it work? How can I bind to a resource as opposed to binding to a text? And I'm just going to kind of comment this out for a second. So when I click it, right, what I want it to do is just turn it and do this. Is that possible? And by the way, one thing that I can also do, one thing I can also do here is if I want to log information, right? One thing I can do here is I can do a couple things. If I want to send this to the log, I can go log.I, and if I go log I, if I press Alt Enter, it'll actually let me enter this log. I can log it out, and I can say this is of type info, and the type of log I'm going to send to Logcat. I'm going to say something like on click button was clicked. Okay, there's my little message. Okay, save. And let's just stop this application, and then I want to rerun it. Okay, that's what I want to do. So I want to run this thing and see what happens. And then we'll be done. And I want to talk about this a little bit, the @string stuff. Is this going to do what I need it to do? Is the question. Because, okay, or is it going to crap out? And how do I get access? Well, here it says layout lunch succeeded. Is it going to crap out? Let's see. So if I go to my application, it ran. And if I click me, it did this. It actually replaced it with the string. Well, that's not what I wanted. It ran because, of course, it's a string. Okay. But that's not what I wanted. Right. Now, here's something else. If I go to Logcat, right, then, you know, is there somewhere that when we press this thing that we got our you know, kind of our in the terminal somewhere in here, did I see that info, right? Because one thing that we noticed is like, so here I'm looking at the you know, Logcat. It says I'm connecting to Samsung, this one. I want to connect to this one. That's what I want. Okay, no debugging processes. This is our Logcat. And it says, here's our regex. So this Samsung SMG975N, right? There we go, right? I want to connect to this. This is what it's connecting to, right? Okay, so it is connecting to the emulator. That's what this Logcat is doing. Let's go back and try it again, and let's watch the emulator when I click me, right? When I do that, it says, here it is. There's the info. On click button was clicked. We get that information. That's pretty cool. But I really didn't connect to this thing in any way, right? Okay. So that's something to note. I was able to make it work, and every time I click that button, you're going to see a response over and over again in here. Every time I click it, watch. So there's another one, and there's another one, and it tells you it's like a timestamp when everything is happening. And this is a great way of troubleshooting the problem. Okay. All right. Nice. Well, we didn't really do anything here when I did this. Maybe there's something else that allows me to. I want to have access to a resource, the resource file itself. And a lot of times R stands for the resource. I wonder if that's going to help me. So let's not do this now. Let's try something else. Let's try R dot. Okay, and I want to go string dot, and then, oh man, look at these. I can do this. So resource string, nice and easy. And then I can scroll down, and then I can choose something that makes sense, like goodbye world. Ah, look at that. Let's see if this is going to make it different than what I thought before. Let's run this thing again, stop this, right? And run the process again. And let's see if this makes a difference. So here's how, see how simple that is? It's really beautiful. I don't have to hard code it like this. I don't have to hard code it. I can still do this, right? But because I can still get text is still going to work. It's still going to read the text of the string, whatever that is, right? But instead of doing it hard coded, right, I can detect what it is and then I can switch it out. Let's see if that's possible, and then we'll end for the day. All right, so launch succeeded. Let's try it out. So if I go here and I click once, goodbye world is good. We know how this works. We know it works. We'll stop this process. And let's try and combine everything we just learned. So we just don't want to do this anymore. When I come back to this binding thing here again, we'll put this on another line so we can kind of do something like this. We can see it a little bit clearer. We want to check to see if it's goodbye world or hello world. It doesn't really matter. Let's suppose it is hello world. Hello world. So if it's hello world, and if I clicked on it, I want to switch to r.string.goodbye world, this one. Otherwise, I want to switch to r.string.hello world, this one. All right, that's what I want to switch to. So that's something I want to switch. I want to take whatever's in here and return it, and I'm comparing my text with a text. Let's see how this works. Is this going to work now? What do you think? As my final thing, I'll have my log information, and everything is good. Save, and let's run this thing one more time, and that's it for today. So run it. And it's running. And let's take a look at this. And if we did everything correct, when it's finished running, it should launch. There it is. And if I click it, it goes, oh man, what happened? How come it didn't work? And what's going on? What failed in this case? Because if I look here, let's take a look. So take a look at Logcat. Logcat, again, I'm looking at this, and it says the button was clicked. So what is the problem? Why am I not receiving this? Why is this failing now? Okay, so a great way to do this is one more test. Let's do a log I, right? We want to push this out, and we want to say, I want to push out binding.hello world label.get text. I want to get text. I want to push that out to what it's going to look at, and that's the string, and I'm going to say this is info. That's the type that I'm going to push this out to. And what if I was to convert this to string, and is that going to be the right thing? What was that? Y tengo hambre. Aha. The check also needs to be changed. Yes, you're right. Sorry, I'm trying to figure that out. So that means that the check, this one here, right, needs to be gone to string. Is that what you're saying? And that's going to be this. Well, yes. Yes, right? So save. And let's see if this works now. And I want to look at the binding here and the binding here, and let's see if it works. So again, I'm showing you this because I want to talk about how this can work and what it can help us with. All right, so let's try that again. Last thing, I swear. So again, all the things that you know how to do, this is the beautiful thing, in Java are going to help you with Android. No problem, right? Because we just need to know how things work in Android. And once you understand how things work, then it's simply just using your intuition. So click me, didn't work, right? Well, let's see what happens with our Logcat and what's happening. So here's what's happening. So it says hello world, right? And what am I changing? What am I looking for? Hello, comma, world, exclamation mark. That's what I'm looking for. And I'm checking to see if this string is equal to this. Well, that's what I'm getting up here. So why is this failing? Why is this failing here, guys? So it says equals to hello world. What's the problem here? And then it says, but now we're not switching anymore. It says this is what I want to put there, but it's not putting it there. What's happening? Well, first of all, right, we know goodbye world is the way it's going to work, right? Equals. Okay, I can try that too, Guillermo. So we're going to say get text, instead of like this, let's try this. Let's say get text dot, and now equals is a weird thing, okay? Equals assumes that the object is going to be a string as well. So that's what I'm looking at there. And I'm saying, okay, hey, if this whatever equals, then do this, otherwise do that. And one thing to note is that this has got to be closed off like so, right? So we need that extra bracket there, right? And if everything goes well, we save this and let's rerun it. And if you're saying this, does it work for you? Did you try it? Do we have some way of detecting what it is? We clearly detected it up here. We're able to detect, but down here we don't do it. And this kind of weird thing is just not working for us. Why do you think it doesn't work, right? It works when we first set it up. It works if I just do set text and whatever this is. But here I'm doing something different, okay? And this is where, here it is. This is where you have to be careful on what you're trying to do. So this is okay now. Okay. Finally, it works. And we needed to do this because when we're comparing our text, the text isn't the exact thing. We need to use equals now because it's more complex than what it was, because we're actually comparing the text that's coming from the string. And we're first comparing it to hello world, not goodbye world, like we had it before. And that's why it's doing what it's doing. So this works great. And that's it for me today, guys. I'm going to put this up on GitHub, and we're good to go. So that's your ICE 10. Very simple. And we're going to say completed on the click me button functionality. So for your app, I need you to show it to me in the emulator. Okay, I want you to prove that you've downloaded everything with Android Studio. You've downloaded an emulator or you're using it on your phone. This is part of the in-class exercise. So we know everything is working for next week. Next week, we're going to get a fresh start and make a brand new app from scratch. And we're going to do more investigation of how this works. Questions before we go for the day? Because that's it for today. And I think that gets you moving on some very simple ways of getting Android development done at a very high level. So kind of a tour of how Android's set up, and keep in mind these lifecycle functions: on create, on start, on resume. These are all functions we can access, and we can kind of look at those. And if you look at the lifecycle, the Android execution flow from the beginning, I think this is kind of a neat little diagram that you can look at. The activities launched, it kind of triggers on create and then on start as an example. And if we kind of put the activity on pause as an example, then on pause triggers when the activity is running. Okay, it actually goes through on resume, because when we start, it's kind of like a resumption of the app from the very beginning, almost like a restart, if you will, right? Then the activity is running. Remember these 4 states: activities running, right? Activities launched, activities running, activities down, activities killed, act is killed. And then you have all these little lifecycle functions that kind of kick in. Again, a really nice little way of looking at this, and that's the execution flow. Okay, and that's really it for the day. Guys, hopefully this was instructive and you learned a little bit about Android, and we'll see you guys next week. I'm going to stop recording now. I'll take any questions you might have. All right, any questions at all?